Hey everyone, welcome to the Chapter 7 presentation on the development of assessment instruments. This chapter is all about the learner-centered assessments, and we're going to be taking a look at what criterion reference tests are, why they're important. You're going to look at the importance of using pre and post tests, and then we'll look at writing objectives that are related to the test items. So the big picture is that if we're using a criterion reference test, just if you haven't heard of that before, these types of assessments need to be linked to an instructional goal or some sort of performance objective. So as you're designing your self-paced instructional lesson here, you're writing the objectives, you're having goals, something to shoot for. So student results will show if the learner was able to achieve the objective in this style of assessment. Did they meet it? If you're a Gwinnett County teacher, there's a few of you from Gwinnett County, think of the AKS, the objectives, the tests that are given end of the semester, whatever it may be, are based around the objectives. So the criterion reference test also allows for learners to reflect on their own on performance too. They can see what their strengths and weaknesses are. So often you hear the words assessment and then testing, and well, either one, whatever term you use, there is a difference, and in the test construction that you create must correspond with the development of performance objectives. So the objectives in the testing should match. It actually shouldn't be created later at the test. It should be created in conjunction. The term assessment is used because it can incorporate a wide variety of activities, and this could be just about anything that the instructor decides is appropriate to show that learning has occurred. Testing usually means multiple choice or paper-based tests. So when we say testing, that's usually what comes to mind. The term criterion and criterion reference assessments are composed of items and performance tasks that measure skills in one or more of your performance objectives. The term criterion is used because it serves as like the benchmark to determine the adequacy of a learner's performance in meeting the objective. So that's why that term is used. There are 4 types of criterion reference tests, and of the 4 types, the entry behaviors test is usually given before anybody learns anything, before the instruction. You want to know if the learner has the necessary prerequisite skills. Now, maybe they do, maybe they don't, but you have to determine that up front if we're going to know and what to do. The pretest is given to see if students have previously mastered some or all of the skills to be included in the instruction. Now, the entry-level behaviors in the pretest can be combined into one test. That's okay. That's doable. And then also keep in mind a pretest isn't always necessary. For instance, if the learner knows nothing about the topic, then giving a pretest may be pointless because it'll just be guessing and it may not even be necessary. Practice tests can be useful. They allow the learner to rehearse the new knowledge and test the understanding themselves. It usually contains fewer skills. They're sort of at the lesson level, and it's not really like a whole big unit level. It's like a practice test, a little quiz. And then the post-test are usually given after instruction. They measure if the objectives have been met. They should measure the terminal objectives and the appropriate sub-skills that you have already identified. So as you review and you're reading through Chapter 7, the book provides a pretty good summary of each, and so I don't know how clearly I conveyed it to you, but the book also does a pretty good job of looking at it there. So if you're not a teacher, and some of you are not teachers, which is fine, you don't have to be a teacher to design instruction here. At some point you're going to have to design a test, and the question is, what type of test do you administer or do you create? And well, even teachers have trouble sometimes matching the right test with the skill. So what's the best test? It just depends on the learning domain that you select in the assessment. Intellectual skills are complex, and maybe the learner would have to write a research paper or compose some sort of song. they're not as easy to assess. It's not necessarily an ABC test. I mean, I guess it could be, but it's a little more difficult. Attitudinal domain skills are also tough to assess because you're dealing with the learner and their attitude and preferences. So how do you measure if their attitude or preference is right or wrong? And then the psychomotor domain, these tasks usually have the learner complete a series of steps that can be evaluated with like a checklist or a rating scale. So did you do this, 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 and that? And those tend to be fairly easy to evaluate. The next big question that you have to ask yourself and try to determine is, how do you determine what the mastery level should be? So you need to specify how well a student must perform a skill and the performance objective. So what does it mean to master something? That's kind of the challenge, and as the expert in working with your subject matter expert, you figure out. Is it to perform at a level expected for the best learner? Or maybe do you ask yourself, should the learner perform the skill? And if they can perform the skill, is that mastery? Is it mastery through a multiple choice test? Maybe it's mastery related to success on a job. This is a lot to consider. I mean, you have to think about what you're doing, what you're looking at, and what mastery means in your setting, in your situation. Now, when you're writing a test item, there's 4 categories of test item qualities that need to be considered. And so you want to consider the goal-centered criteria, learning-centered criteria, context-centered criteria, and assessment-centered criteria. And in each of the following slides, we'll talk about each of these in some more depth. So let's take a look at the goal-centered criteria. With the goal-centered criteria, you're trying to match the behavior to include the action and the concept. So you would state things, define things, perform with guidance, perform independently. If the objective says students should label something, then when you have the test, there should be some labeling task. Or if the objective says define the meaning of blank, then on the assessment you should have a task or similar concept where the student defines. So the test formatting that you create will be hinged on the wording of these objectives. With the learner-centered criteria, you need to tailor the assessment to the needs of the learner. The learner's experience, their background, their interests, their vocabulary level, their language level all play a role. So you got to make sure that it's at the appropriate level. If it's for children, then it's written for children. If it's for adults in a highly specialized field, well, then the language needs to reflect that. The learner should know and understand the terms that you're presenting. And then the situations and the scenarios presented should be the ones that the learner can relate to. It should be appropriate to the level and their mastery level. And you should also be sensitive to gender and diversity issues when creating items. So we got to think big picture with this. The context-centered criteria is related to what is applicable and what is authentic to the performance setting. Is it realistic? Is it authentic? Is what you're going to make the learner do relevant on the job or in the setting? Does the learning environment have the resources needed to actually do what you're saying? So it might be all fine and dandy on paper and in your plan, but when you actually carry it out into the job, into the field, is the stuff that you need actually there to do it? And if not, then it's probably not going to go so well. If the behavior is to be carried out in front of an audience and you say that, then part of the assessment would be to present in front of an audience. Students will perform a cello solo. Okay, so then they would actually perform it in front of somebody. When you are thinking about writing the test items, you need to make sure what you're doing is well written, professional, no typos, clear directions, formatted right, no tricks, nothing tricky. And that could be difficult to do. Sometimes it's easy to make mistakes if you're rushing, but in this field and what you're doing, you got to take it slow and do the best you can. Make sure there's not mistakes. You've thought it through. So this is just a like summary of types of test items. So if you're using define or select or solve, you can see the best types of questions to do. I mean, if you're going to look at the bottom, operator perform, well, you're actually going to want to do it. That would be difficult to do in a short answer. You probably couldn't do it, or matching. So it's important that you match up the skills with the appropriate test type items. So when you evaluate the test and the items on the test, make sure the test works. Take it yourself. Have a colleague take it. Look for typos. Look for little things that you might not have caught. Are the directions clear and simple? Are they easy to follow? Are the test items appropriate? Are they sending the right information? Is the way you respond, is it realistic? Is it just an ABC test? Are they supposed to fill in a blank? Is there room to fill in the blank? Is there enough space? Are the response methods clear to the learners? Is it clearly that you use the drop-down box to select the choice? Or is it clear that they actually have to write things out in sentences? Do you want a picture? You got to say that. And then is the time, space, and equipment available for this stuff? If you have a fancy online lesson instruction, but and you want students to do something with computers, but there's no internet access or limited access, then this may be a challenge, or maybe they're not at the right level. So these are just things that one must consider. When you are developing the instrument, you also want to think about a rubric. If your instructional goal is to use instructional design process to design, develop, and evaluate 1 hour of assessment material, self-instruction material, how would you be assessing that? So what are you looking for? Are you just checking things off? How does this happen? So basically, you just have to consider how you are going to assess this. So maybe the rubric, maybe a checklist, maybe a rating scale. These are the things that you need to think about when you're putting this together, frequency count even. Each step of the way for your tasks, you're doing a self-instructional design project here. You're creating something. I've tried to provide you with the objectives of each component, and then you have a rubric so you can see right up front what I'm looking for, and you could base your design around that. That might not be appropriate in all cases. I wouldn't give you a rating scale. I don't think that would work here. Portfolios may be something that you consider. Portfolios may be a little more time challenge, and they may not always be appropriate based on your situation, because they take time to review, they take time to put together, but it could potentially show if the learner is developing, if they've refined their skills. But it really just depends on what you're trying to do, if a portfolio is an appropriate method. All right, so when you're evaluating convergence in the design process, I guess you need to ask yourself if the products you're creating, are they consistent with the step-by-step process that you've already put together? Let's just say you've got the goals analyzed, you've got the subordinate skills identified, you've got the learner and context analyzed, the objectives written, and the assessments developed. Does your assessment match this? And just coming from my classroom perspective as a teacher, sometimes I like to think they are, but sometimes my assessments might not always match the objectives clear enough, and that it's not always, it's something that comes up from time to time. So you can kind of see just in a visual form, this is the general structure that you could follow when it comes to your sub-skill performance objectives and the sample assessment. So As you can see on this slide here, there is a skill to be demonstrated. So just taking that previous slide and filling it in. The matching performance objective is, and the specific test items are there. So the skill, the performance objective is how do you test it? They line up perfectly. That looks good. It allows at a quick glance that all three align and are parallel. And this is good because it may save some time in the long run, because you might not have to revamp things later. If you're up front with the skill, what you have to do in the test item, it'll probably save some time. So this is the end of this presentation. Basically, what we've heard in this section is a little recap on creating assessment items. You will be creating assessment in your instructional piece. So you need to think about what's the best fit for what you are trying to do in the best learning domain. So I hope this was useful and it mirrors what you should be reading. If you have any questions, please don't hesitate to contact me, ask me. I'm always here to help. So have a good day, and I'll talk to you soon.